will listen to Caroline Mockler, and I want to thank her as well for being with us today, so that everybody is able to follow, especially what Bishop Seoka will talk about. Yeah, Bishop, I'm very happy that you are here today and that you took time to present your book. We have seen a lot of books being printed, being written on Marikana in the last 10 years. So my first question would be, why another one? Why did you think it's important to have your voice heard in that whole choir of Marikana remembrance? What is your specific input? What is your view on the issue? And why did you wait so long to write it? You have to unmute yourself first. Bishop, the floor is yours.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Simone, thank you so much. And thank also all the staff members of CASA and the board for enabling us to publish this work. But the book is really, as I put it, it's an eyewitness account of events on that particular day. Because I was personally at the copy on the day of the massacre. And it happened as I left the area, because the police and the company had asked me to leave immediately, as they would not be responsible to what may happen to me. And so we then left. So the difference between this work here is that it's a personal experience. It's an eyewitness narrative, whereas I think most people would have heard about the massacre from other parties. And this one is also linked up with the survivors. But on the day of the massacre, I also had an opportunity to speak to the leadership of the strike, and was given some instructions as to what they needed done on their behalf. And so I left and went and met with the leadership of Lawmen, as I was asked by the leadership of the rock drillers. But what is also important is that the launch of this book is very timely, since this year marks a decade of untold consequences of police brutality. Now, if you think anything has changed, you're just deceiving yourself, because police brutality in this country has become a norm. People die in the hands of people who ought to be protecting them. But on that particular day, on the 16th of August, the workers had gone to the courtroom and assembled there, wishing or desiring to engage the employer, as they call him in Kashi, to ask for an increase in their salaries. They were saying they were paid very little, and they wanted a living wage. But they also wanted the living and working conditions attended to, because most of them were living in the sheds. So I was able to be their mouthpiece on that particular day. I engaged not only the management, the directors, but I also spoke to the police on site, who were meeting, talking to management, and trying to dispense the people from the copy. And so I am able to tell what the police did on that particular day, how the company reacted, and how the strikers themselves presented themselves on that particular day. So a lot of people ask a question as to why I was at the copy on that particular day. The reason was that the media, print and television, were talking about the potential confrontation that would lead to violence, because the previous night some people had died already. The people on strike had confronted the non-strikers, trying to persuade them to join the mass protest. And so some security and police were murdered. But also, I had pastoral responsibility, because the Lonmin or Marikana is within my episcopal jurisdiction. So I had a responsibility of cure of souls, but also to take care of the socio-economic needs of the people in the area. So I was really familiar with that particular environment. And so it was natural for me, as I previously have been working with the working class communities, to go there to be in solidarity with them as they were camping on the mountain. So another question probably that is important that you, Simone, have alluded to is, why do we have to talk about their names and publish their pictures? Well, it's a work of compassion. It also relates to the African experience. There is a Nguni belief that if the living continue to mention the name of the deceased is actually alive. So he never disappears in their memory, in their language, in their dealings in life. So mentioning their name is to keep the narrative alive. Having their pictures is to enable people to actually relate to them as human beings who incidentally were exposed to this dangerous situation and died. And so we are registering in the memories of people the physical experience of all these people that we talk about in the book. And that this is one of the reasons. It's not because we don't really appreciate what they were doing. It is more affirming. And because some of them were engaged physically with them and talking to them and recorded their works, their experiences. And therefore it is very important to mention their names and to show their pictures. So there were three of us, Advocate Darlin Pofu and Joseph Matunjwa, who is leader of AMCO, who were then subsequently asked by the rock drillers to please help them publicize their plight. And so we had to go around talking to various people. And people in Europe, such as Casa and Plough, the fruits, I see Jakob is there, who actually discovered that the biggest buyer and most important buyer of platinum from Lonmin was BASF, which is a German company. And so we had to make a trip to Germany to protest them, but also to engage the investors, the shareholders, to tell them as what their investment is doing or has done in South Africa, that people died. And to our surprise, some of the shareholders didn't know, they were never told that in actual fact, BASF was involved with a company where massacre had taken place. But we also went, I see Barbara there in Switzerland, trying to spread the news. And in England, we worked with London Mining Network, were very helpful, and some universities. And so a lot of people in Europe would know what actually happened. Can you still hear me? Oh, okay. And so we spoke at AGMs, we protested outside their meeting venues, informing investors of where things were in South Africa. So as we launch this book today, not all the affected people have been compensated. Some widows have been given some money through their legal representatives. But sadly, the company decided to offer them jobs to replace their husbands. And so when you talk to these widows, they will tell you that they are constantly being reminded of the massacre and death of their husband as they pass the copy to their offices. Some children were given afforded schooling, school fees being paid. But in terms of financial compensation, in fact, the directors of Lonmin were awarded a lot of money. For instance, Mr. Magara, who subsequently became CEO, was given 11 million rand when Lonmin sold the mine to Sibanye Stillwater. Today, as we speak, according to the records in 2019, the average salary for a drill worker is 13,893. Now, if you compare that to what the workers had asked for in 2012, on the massacre, subsequent to that was 12,500. Now, compare that to the strength of the rand or the euro today. On the other hand, when Sibanye took over, the workers were still crying out, asking for better wages. They recently, about a month or so ago, they went on a strike, and they were asking for an increase of 1,000 rand. The company said they can give them about 800 rands, and they went on to camp outside the Union building where our president is located. Not long ago, Neil Frontman, who is a CEO for Sibanye Stillwater, was given in bonuses and salaries 300 million rand in 1 year. That budget, if it's compared to the budget for the social labor plan, it's nothing. The social labor plan for over the years is no near to any amount that has been paid to the executive. 300 million rand in 1 year is obscene. It's something that cannot be acceptable. Recently, there has been a court case where the legal fraternity was trying to find out if Cyril can be charged. And as I speak to you, Cyril, who is the president of this country, has not apologized to the widows, to the public. And some of you would remember that at the funeral of Winnie Mandela, he publicly said he would go to Marikana to say he was sorry for what had happened. And that has never happened to this very day. If he had done that, the people would not have insisted that a case be opened against him. So 3 weeks ago, the High Court in Gauteng, through the presiding president, found that in actual fact, Cyril has a case to answer to. Even though the issue of collusion between the state, the employer, and Cyril cannot be proved, but the judge says Cyril is liable for the massacre and can be sued. So very soon, the lawyers will again open a case where you will have to answer in the court of law why he wrote those emails calling for concomitant action that we believe resulted to people being murdered. And so when we think today about Marikana, we can't help but wish to bury our heads in the sand, because the miners who died in vain. The questions are being raised on the state of our constitutional democracy. Are we really enjoying democracy in this country or not? The hopes of people in 1994 have become a nightmare for most people, because very little has changed. That is being appreciated. But the sad thing is that the poor have become poorer. A handful of people, including our present president, became billionaires with no work experience, while on the other hand, the people who were actually digging, who have built this country, are still suffering from starvation. Evidently, as we commemorate the decade of the massacre, the miners still have nothing to show but grief and empty hands. We still have people who are limping, people like Zokolo Magidwane, who had about 9 bullets in their body. As I speak to you, he has never been compensated. He's still waiting. The lawyers are working very hard to ensure that he does get something, because he is not able right now to work and provide for himself and for his family. When Lonmin sold the company to Sibanya Stillwater, Sibanya promised to take full responsibility of some consequences of the massacre. They promised that the company would put together sustainable development. We asked them to put a memorial facility where people can go and meditate and talk about what actually happened, how that has impacted on their lives. all we have been shown are vegetable gardens. I was there in June, and all what I witnessed were people living in extreme poverty. The condition seems to be worse than what we saw in 2012. The women in the area are saying to us, it was better in Egypt, meaning Lonmin was much better than Sibanya Stillwater. Neil Frontman is not talking to them, but he talks about them. And so with the Benchmarks Foundation research team, we met with management, asked them to show us what are they actually doing, what has been done at the copy. They drove us through Nkaneng, which is a village where the miners lived, and close proximity to the copy. All they told us about were promises to do something about infrastructure, improve the road system, put lights, and provide water, because a lot of water in that area is consumed by the mine. Communities are without sufficient water for domestic use. So on our visit, there was nothing strikingly new that tells the story of transformed Lonmin in Sibanya Stillwater, particularly around the community of Nkaneng, where people actually died. As in most developed countries, the people of Bapong are living in impoverished community. Children are dying of hunger. Unemployment is very high. And you'll recall that one of the causes for the strike was that protest from the communities, that the young people in the area were not provided jobs. People were being recruited from the former homelands because they provided cheap labor. That struggle still continues today. There are still a lot of young people who are calling out. When we, 2 weeks ago, we ran a workshop there, hearing the people's voices a decade after the massacre. What has changed? What are people's hopes? What are they aspiring to? All you hear is that justice has not been served. An apology has not been made. There's still scarcity of water. People's streets are still dark. Roads are still as rough. Crime is very high. And so Sibanya Stillwater's behavior is worse than that of Lonmin. And so people are beginning to say it was better because Lonmin used to come and speak to us and with us and do some things that people were asking to improve the quality of their lives. So very briefly, I'm saying to you, nothing strikingly has changed. We have seen some cosmetic displays of things that do not add value in the lives of the people, but shows or gives the impression that the company is concerned about the plight of the people in terms of their accommodation, their working condition. Sibanya Stillwater is still the highest in fatalities. People continue to die and not much is being said, but the workers will tell us the mine collapsed, so and so have died, and we're looking forward to what they're going to say now that August is only a month away. So very briefly, the book will tell you what is happening to date. Our last chapter talks about the conditions which we have seen, the stories that people are telling us, and what we have seen with our own eyes, and what the company, compared what we see and what the company tells us they have done. And so we would want to encourage you to get the book, read it, and share it. And some of the experience that I talk about there, experience of my own learnings in Germany, how the clergy or the church got involved in the life of the working class. And that capacitated the workers to stand for their rights, and also empowered them to constitute themselves into trade union that demanded the improvement of their working lives.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bishop, for this update on the one hand, but also to take the opportunity and to take really the time to write such an important piece. For us, it was also about the church and how the church works through specific people. And it was always very important when we came to the BASF AGM, which was only possible because of the critical shareholders, which I forgot to mention in the beginning, who are also part of the Plough Back the Fruits campaign. The critical shareholders opened the doors for us to enter the AGM of BASF. And it was always important to have you there as a clergy. But as you also write in your book, it's about people, specific only about, mostly men, I think, as clergy who took over the responsibility. But you were quite disappointed about the church as such. And I know that we have some church people, especially on the German side, who used to work in the anti-apartheid movement, who are the founding members of our organization, CASA. And I would love you to maybe elaborate a bit more about the role of the church, not only in Marikana, but also when it comes to solidarity work and to maybe find solutions for problems like you have described at the moment. Where is the church at the moment?
Well, firstly, let me just say that the massacre would not have happened if the company and the state had listened to the Benchmarks Foundation's research work. We predicted it, and we warned the company that the likelihood is that there's going to be a huge strike, and that may result to death. Nobody listened to us. And the Benchmarks Foundation is a parachurch organization working mainly around the mining communities, helping the communities to stand up, fight for their rights, and do things that they themselves believe are necessary and important to improve the quality of their lives. But you said the church is present, but it's not as it was during the apartheid era, where it was prophetic. There is an effort to be alongside the poor and the suffering people, but the prophetic message, speaking truth to power, is not as loud as one would expect it. Notwithstanding the fact that we are where we are in our constitutional democracy because of what the church has done, with the support, of course, of anti-apartheid organizations. like CASA brought for the world. And as I mentioned to you about my own experience in Germany, the work of Gosner Mission, how the Workers' Academy contributed to training some of us here in South Africa to be able to be in solidarity with the working class. And so I would urge you to revisit that history, because even though we say we're in a new dispensation, the truth of the matter, suffering is much greater, because service delivery is very poor. A lot of good work has been overwhelmed by corrupt politicians, corrupt leaders of state enterprises. And so there are more potholes than we ever had before right now. There's an increase on street children, an increase on unemployment, particularly amongst the young people. And all those are the issues that needs to be addressed. If they're not attended to, there is a chance of another explosion that may be difficult to control, because when young people are angry, they cease to think rationally, as we saw in 1976. And so I think that there is still a lot of work that needs to be done in the churches, in schools, universities. I think you should continuously be encouraging people to revise their anti-apartheid work, but in a different form, so that it addresses the issues of unemployment, issues of poverty, and therefore sustainable development is a right way to go.